Whether you've played the game or are still trying to get over Cyberpunk Edgerunners, I'm sure you've noticed that Mike Pondsmith's Cyberpunk universe has a lot going on within it. While you can look at the not-so-distant future and evaluate it as another dystopian sci-fi product, that would be an immense underestimation of how much work has gone into building this deeply immersive setting. Even with all the exposition pieces from our dear pal Keanu and the item descriptions found in Cyberpunk 2077, it's nearly impossible to get all the lore details about Night City and the world that surrounds it. But if you're looking to dive into the difference between a corporation and a megacorporation, or you've been dying to find out where the word choom comes from, stick with me, kid, and we'll try and figure that out together. To begin this info dump on Cyberpunk lore, I thought there'd be no better place to start than Night City itself, the major setting for the Cyberpunk 2020 tabletop game, CD Projekt Red's video game, and Edgerunners. So, without further ado, welcome to Night City, chooms. The city of dreams, once the city on the edge of tomorrow. In 2077, the home of the cyberpunk setting sits on the Del Coronado Bay, sitting right on the border between North and Southern California. I'm going to try and detract from the story of Night City as little as possible in this video, so as not to jump into too many rabbit holes, but I might as well explain what happened with California as quickly as possible. In the early 2000s, California broke off from the USA to form its own state. Then, in 2012, the North decided it had enough of the LA Metroplex dominating Californian politics, so it made itself a free state. Like with all things in cyberpunk lore, the politics that split California could have their own video. But all you need to know for now is that North and South California are split, and Night City sits itself between the two. Night City is currently run by mega-corporations and filled with gangs, violence, organised crime, and everything else you'd expect from a futuristic dystopian city. The streets are wide, the skyscrapers are dense and packed with people, and the lights are bright. Being a sprawling, huge area, Night City is full of different communities and cultures, with many of these being reflected in the city's distinct neighbourhoods. In 2077, it was voted the worst place to live in America, but things aren't so bad if you're a rich corpo. If you're on the other side of the economic ladder, however, things are gonna suck. Of course, Night City didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It was constructed in 1994 by a man named Richard Knight. Richard Knight was a businessman who founded his own development company, hoping to build more than just offices for corporations. Knight had the dream of using his advanced construction techniques to make his own dream city, free of crime and the economic downfall of the world plaguing the early 1990s. Starting a new company known as Knight International, which had gained investors in large corporations that wanted a safe haven from world governments, including the likes of Arasaka, which you might know from Cyberpunk 2077, EBM, and Petrochem. Thanks to the downfall of the world economy known as the Collapse, something again that we might get into in another video, Knight was able to secure a vast chunk of land for an extremely cheap price. Knight had big dreams for this city, which was to be named Coronado City at the time. He wanted it to be completely free of crime and for it to be without corruption. Knight would never realise these dreams though, as when he wanted to build his city he was forced into collusion with the West Coast mobs. The Mafia, Yakuza, and other mobs around the west coast of America controlled a lot of its government and construction companies, you see, meaning that Knight had to dirty his hands before construction could even begin. However, he didn't let the mobs rule him, and he still kept crime from controlling Coronado City. However, this would lead to Knight's eventual death in 1994 and his mega project being named after him. Once Richard Knight was dead and Night City had been constructed, the mobs that had built it began battling for power over the city. The corporations that invested their money into it were apathetic to the suffering of Night City's people and let crime and violence run rampant until about 2009. These are known as Night City's worst years, as they were full of endless battles among mobs, making the streets unsafe to walk in, both at day and at night. This mob war came to an end in 2009 when Arasaka decided that it wanted control of Night City, and so it and a few other corps set out to destroy the mob bases. For 2 years, Arasaka led a quick war against the mobs, destroying their hubs and assassinating their bosses. By the time the dust settled in 2011, the corporations had control of the city and built new housing to maintain the thousands of troops that they needed to keep the city under control. After this point, things get a little bit boring, and Night City does quieten down until about 2020. The corporations had solid control over the city, and it was growing again as an urban region. However, this doesn't mean that Richard's dream was necessarily fulfilled, as while Night City was growing economically, it still harboured an immense amount of crime, making it a dangerous place that required a lot of its citizenry to be constantly armed or protect themselves with cybernetic enhancements. This period of relative quiet couldn't last for long though, and between 2021 and 2023, Night City was caught in the Fourth Corporate War. Now, I know what you're thinking here. Fourth Corporate War? What about the other three? Well, I can cover them another time. All you need to know about the Fourth Corporate War is that it engaged with a lot of cities and was mostly between Militech and Arasaka. And the struggle between these two ended up causing chaos in the streets of Night City. Unlike other cities caught up in the war, such as Busan and Rio de Janeiro, Night City didn't have its citizenry evacuated, which led to a lot of innocent casualties, especially when Militech dropped a nuke on Arasaka Tower. The Mini Nuke was about 25% as powerful as that dropped on Hiroshima. It levelled Arasaka Tower instantly and killed 12,000 people, heavily damaging the surrounding areas. Earthquakes and flooding soon erupted around the city, and the rubble from the tower fell all across the NorCal region and into the sea. Also, for 2 years, the sky was turned red from the dust cloud caused by the explosion, and even years afterwards, Militech's nuke was still remembered as the sky would occasionally turn crimson. Even with all this destruction and radiation, most of Night City's citizens were unaffected and continued their lives due to the cyberware installed within them. People were forced to move out of the city, however, in some cases, and many of its streets were ruined. Despite all this, Night City did a lot better than other cities that were part of the war, but it needed to rebuild, something that began a few years later. In 2025, Elizabeth Kress, President of the new United States of America, side note, yes, it's new United States of America because the old one collapsed, and ex-CEO of Militech blamed the nuke on Arasaka, saying the latter blew up its own corporate centre to prevent Militech from seizing it. Bit of a strange logic there, but mostly the media bought it, so say what you will. The official story then became that a terrorist group issued a threat to detonate the nuke in order to stop colonial capitalism. Kress then built on this, using xenophobic ideas to paint the CEO of Arasaka as a foreign invader who wanted to destroy an American city in order to pursue his own personal gains. As a result, Arasaka, the corporation, no longer had the rights to operate in the USA, and its board members were declared terrorists. Even with Arasaka bumped out of America, Kress showed no signs of interest in rebuilding Night City. Instead, she wanted to bring the free city and its citizens back into new USA control. However, Night City resisted the rule of the new United States and sought out its own recovery. In part 2, we're going to look at that recovery, and how Night City made itself what it is in Cyberpunk 2077. I hope you've enjoyed this little look at the beginnings of Night City. If you want to see more, make sure you leave a comment, like, all that jazz. I hope to see you again soon, Chooms. Keep yourself safe out there.